Interior, clothes closet, night. Jerome, a tall, handsome man, sits in front of his computer. He turns it on and adjusts his mic. A new podcast begins with his friends, Zach and Justin. Well, if you couldn't tell by that succinct introduction, we're talking about screenplays tonight.
Awesome. What is a screenplay for people who don't know?
A screenplay is essentially the foundation of the story that directors and producers, actors use to read the story and gain their motivations and material for the film. So it's the story laid out scene by scene on paper with the location, the time of day, the characters, their conversations, any specific or important visual elements or props that are going to be used. The foundation of pre-production through production when they shoot a movie.
It is the blueprint of a movie.
Yeah, that's a much better way of saying it. I like to think of it as the skeleton because it's often the first thing that a writer, it's the first thing that a writer creates when he's really sitting down to make a movie. You know, he has an idea in his head and they decide that he's going to flesh it out. And so he starts creating a draft about what this movie is going to look like. And they're pretty cool. There's very specific, I say very specific, there's variations to it, but there's a generally accepted format to screenplays and how you're supposed to write them out so that you best show a visual story on paper. Unlike a book, there's no internal machinations of the character or explanations of why a character did this or that or what their feelings are. It's very straight to the point, and what it would look like if you closed your eyes and envisioned it. It's the idea of producing the movie on paper. It's the first step before thumbnails, before production meetings. It's the backbone. You can't start a movie without first producing a screenplay.
And how many screenplays are there in a movie? I guess it depends.
How many screenplays?
How many variations of a screenplay?
That depends. Screenplays. So, you initially have the first draft, and then that gets approved, and writers look over it, and then they make adjustments, and then you'll have something. And Justin, you might have to correct my terminology. I believe it's just like a prospective screenplay that they send to potential actors to get actors interested in it. And then once actors are locked in and they start pre-production, they'll have something called like a pre-production screenplay. And as the production goes forward, that might be updated. So it really depends on the size of the production, but there can be tons depending on how big the movie is. Like, think about, we were just talking about it before the movie started. Think about Avatar. Like James Cameron has been working on 30 years now, would fathom the variations of screenplays that he must have had. Or you might see in a local film festival, might just have one or two drafts. It might just be, someone wrote it, decided to film it, and they did it. They made it. There's lots of variations.
Yeah. Typically, screenplays go through several rewrites before the actual production starts. And then once the production starts, then you have your shooting draft. And it's usually in the order that they're shooting. So, with productions, we don't typically shoot in order of the scenes. Only one movie I can think of right now that did that, and that is The Sixth Sense, shot in order of the scenes that are shown on screen, right? And so we go, and then while production's going on, there's rewrites and rewrites and rewrites, and then you have at the post production, you have your scripts and stuff for the editors and whatnot. So I mean, you write a script for a studio, you might get one. You as a writer might get one rewrite, and then it goes off to the studio, and they do all the changes and stuff. So screenplays go through a lot of crap before a finished product comes out.
Yeah, but I really enjoyed the process of screenplays and watching that evolve into a finished product. Like for instance, sitting in front of me on my computer is a screenplay for Django Unchained by Quentin Tarantino, and it's literally a scanned photocopy of one of his drafts when they were shooting. And on the front page, it's got scribbled Django Unchained, written, directed by Quentin Tarantino. And then it has last draft, April 26th, 2011, scratched out. And next to it, it says draft 113 of 12. So this is a like mid-production screenplay that I'm looking at here. And it's very interesting to me just how sometimes stories evolve outside of the screenplay and sometimes they stick straight to it. I just love that process. Like another screenplay I have is Napoleon Dynamite, and I remember reading stories that they made this screenplay, Jared Hess and Joshua Hess, and they just kind of got the actors involved in it and they just kind of went for it. They did a lot of guerrilla filmmaking and didn't do a lot of like pre-rehearsal and things. They just kind of had the script and they went for it. Two very different films, two very different production styles, and they both made incredible films.
Yeah. Napoleon Dynamite, I believe, started off as a short film. And then I don't know who, but somebody convinced Jared Hess that he should make it into a feature. So that's what he did. And I'm glad he did, because that movie,
God bless him.
I don't care what anybody says, that movie still holds up.
It's great. I also love the visualization process of screenplays and how they have to use this descriptive language from a third party viewpoint where you're kind of forced to read it and envision the scene in your mind. And sometimes it's so interesting to me how different scenarios that you watch or that you get when you watch the finished product. So like Napoleon Dynamite, I'm just gonna read like the first page of the Napoleon Dynamite screenplay. The Napoleon Dynamite screenplay. Every scene starts with some signifiers denoting whether it's an exterior scene, which is outdoors, or an interior scene, and where it is and what time of day. So if you ever read a screenplay, every time you start a new scene, you're going to see that designation. And that is a way for the writers and producers who are reading this to kind of help visually switch to the next scene. So, page 1, exterior, Napoleon's house, morning. So we know where it's going to be at. It's in his house, it's the morning. Napoleon, a high school teenager, stands in front of his small farmhouse waiting for the school bus. He has curly, poofy hair with bedhead, generic glasses, early 90s moon boots, and a t-shirt with an Idaho wildlife scene printed on it. It's so descriptive. He opens his trapper keeper to reveal an action figure attached to some fishing line. A school bus screeches to the halt in front of him. He closes the trapper keeper. Then he goes to the next scene. Interior school bus, morning. The bus door opens. Napoleon gets on and goes to the very back. He sits down next to Vern, a kindergartner eating a hash brown. Vern, what are you going to do today, Napoleon? Napoleon, whatever I feel like I want to do. Gosh! Napoleon opens a window next to him and takes out his action figure. He looks ahead to make sure the bus driver isn't watching. He wraps more fishing line around the action figure and then chucks it out the window. I love that. It's so descriptive, and the way that it's written is so indicative of the way that they established their shots. Like the dead, dry, just cuts and the static shots that they use throughout the film, and just the timing of everything, even the way that they wrote the introduction. They have a perfect description of who this guy is. It doesn't explain any of his intentions whatsoever. Why the heck does he have an action figure? Why the heck is he getting on a bus with kindergartners? Why the heck is he like ragging on this 5-year-old who's eating a hash brown? Why do they describe the kindergartner eating a hash brown? I love that process.
So do you feel like viewers get more out of the screenplay than the movie at times by realizing these extra bits of information?
Well, not necessarily, not all the time, but sometimes. If you watch a movie that is surrounded by controversy, or went through a lot of rewrites, or has kind of a split difference between like people either love it or hate it, I like to get screenplays for those types of movies, because often when you look at the screenplay for those types of movies, you can find material that was taken out of the final draft and kind of explains what the writer's intentions were for this character, why they were acting a certain way, or something that would have helped make something make sense further down the line. And it's also really fun. I'm a huge nerd. I actually, whenever the best pictures come out, so like the Oscars are coming up, whenever the best original screenplays get nominated, all of the best original screenplays gets posted online as PDF. That's part of the Oscar process, and you can go online and find the PDFs of all of these movies that are up for best picture, best screenplay. And I like to take those screenplays and watch them side by side with the movies. I'll actually watch the movie through first. Like I'll watch the movie through first one time, and then I'll go get the screenplay on my laptop, and I'll go back and I'll watch it again like the next day, and read the screenplay, watch the movie, and pause. I'm like, oh, okay, they changed this here. They moved this. That explains this. Go to the next scene, read the next page. I've done that with Django Unchained. I've done that with The Power of the Dog. It's just a fun experience for me. I like to see the writer's intentions and the finished product, and how they align sometimes, and then other times are completely different.
Did you do it with cats though? That's the big question.
No, but I should.
Like seriously, I'm curious. Like the stage
Will.
play
I'm
versus
Googling that right
the
now.
screenplay. I just can imagine the creepy descriptions of the humanoid looking cats.
Yeah, but the thing is, you have to you kind of have to be on the ball, because the nominations committee who distribute the screenplays often take them down. So if you don't find the screenplay when it was originally posted online, sometimes you can't find it, or you have to do a lot of digging to find a PDF. And what also happens sometimes, which provides frustration to no end, is there are also movie transcription websites where they simply take the transcription of the movie and record that as the screenplay, quote unquote. And so you'll look up a screenplay for the Batman, and then you'll just find a website that's like a transcription of what they say in the movie, which is entirely different and useless, because it's gotten rid of all of the good stuff, all the clarifying information,
Exposition,
the author's intentions, the description, the removed scenes.
So the movie
everything.
Transcription, what are you left with? Dialogue and some closed captioning descriptions?
Essentially, yeah, they literally just take the transcript from the movie, like the closed captioning from a movie, and put it in a Word document and put it online. So when someone looks for the screenplay, they just get this transcription.
Mm-hmm. I think reading a screenplay, at least when I was skimming through the Joker, Todd Phillips's Joker, Joaquin Phoenix, it felt like I was reading like a book in a way,
Yeah.
and at times not grammatically correct or the most formal of sentences when Phillips is writing about Arthur's history or what he's feeling when he's getting beaten up by the teenagers in the beginning of the movie. Like, for example, just read one little excerpt. The kids start kicking and beating the shit out of Arthur. It's brutal and vicious. Nobody on the street stops to help. And then it says, close on Arthur's clown face down on the road, sweat running down his face, smearing his makeup. Doesn't even look like he's in pain. He just takes the beating. Arthur's good at taking a beating. And the last line, that stupid smile painted on his face. And then title. And that's when the big old Joker, the
I like
words Joker pop up on the screen and you have that eerie music. But just that excerpt of description, it just it's fantastic. And that's not something I don't think Arthur was like used to this type of pain just based off of that. But I guess I could assume so. Um, it's been a while since I've seen the movie, but I feel like some screenplays, like I would have known, like from like watching the movie about certain things had I not read the screenplay, perhaps.
Yeah, they often give so much to me. It's almost like lore. Like people have an obsession with Star Wars or Harry Potter and stuff. And to me, screenplays are like the lore for a lot of the movies in my life because some of these are based off of narratives and stories that you can read a book about, but some of them, like Django Unchained or Napoleon Dynamite or The Joker, those are original screenplays. And so if you want to learn more about it, you kind of have to go direct to the source from the writer itself. And it's the way that the writer is handing this out and giving you a chance to, share in the creation process and the secret of how their brain works and how they produce. But anyhow, I wanted to ask you, because I kind of gave you guys homework, what screenplays you came across. Did you watch the movies with them? What did you guys think? What was your experience?
Justin, would you like to go first?
Sure. So I'm going to be honest with you, Jake. I didn't read anything, but I did in college. We had to, for one of my classes, we had to read feature-length screenplays, and the two that I can remember reading was American Beauty with Kevin Spacey.
Cool.
And it was, I mean, it was pretty basic. It kind of pretty much followed the movie, if you've ever seen the movie. So I watched the movie and read the screenplay, and it pretty much followed the movie. I mean, there might have been some things there were a few things that were taken out from the movie compared to the screenplay. I don't remember what happens. I barely like that movie was a good movie, but I don't really remember it that well. But we also read the screenplay, and I watched the movie to Scott Pilgrim versus the World.
Oh, that sounds great.
And so the screenplay was really cool because I don't know if you've ever seen Scott Pilgrim versus the World, but it's basically like a movie but a video game, right? So
Yeah.
like they fight and there's superpowers, and whenever Scott beats up one of the evil X's, that they burst into coins, and like all that stuff was described in the screenplay. And it was really cool the way Edgar Wright was able to like write it down, and you could see it in your head. Like, and there was one point where he says, this thing happens, and then in all caps he's like it's like a real life video game. And I was like, it is like a real life video game. And so I remember just reading the script and being like, oh my god, this is like just like the movie. But it's really cool because you look at this movie and you go, how the hell are you supposed to put that into words, But man,
Exactly.
Edgar Wright is a boss when it comes to writing. Like
Mm-hmm.
he can write. And so he was able to do it. And like, even though I had seen the movie before, it had been a while since I watched the movie. And so when I read the script before watching the movie again, I just remember going, oh yeah, just like that. Yeah. So it almost sounds like porn or something, man. Cause I was like, oh yeah, this is cool. This is good. Oh yeah. Like reading it, and I'm like, oh my god, that's right. That is what happens. Like I could see it in my head through the whole thing, and then I watched it. It was like perfect. It was
Yeah.
in sync. It was
I
great.
remember reading the script for or the screenplay for Hot Fuzz. Edgar
Yeah.
Wright's screenplay for Hot
Mhm.
Fuzz.
Mhm.
Um, and I just remember being so impressed with his ability to describe such fast-paced cuts and dialogue and inserts and voiceovers um, and material that they're really complex. When you just watch the movie, you see the finished product and it all comes together. But when you're producing a screenplay, every single time you cut away. So, for instance, when Angel is in the police, he's in the
Police
what do you
department.
call it, the police office,
Yeah.
and then the police department, and then it's talking about him, and then they do like a voiceover, and then they do an insert, and then they go back to the police station, and they do another insert, and then they go back to the police station, and go do another insert. Every single time you do that, you have to you have to literally plan that out in the screenplay. So I think for some of the Hot Fuzz when they're introducing Angel, there's like 9 or 10, inserts back and forth on one page because it's all like so
Yeah.
fast. I would love to get the screenplay for Baby Driver. Can you just imagine? In fact, I'm gonna look that up right now. These like
Specificity.
specificity. Thank you, sir. That you would just have to have in the screenplay alone to have your entire production staff understand the purpose and the of that movie. Like that is a movie that is it is a action, like like an action comedy musical drama that is cut literally to the beat of music. Every single scene, every single action, and it has to be done perfectly or else the whole thing falls apart. You just get such a great idea of how these writers think and how to write to create these different scenarios. I'm trying to find the cat's screenplay right now. I'm obsessed with finding the cat screenplay now. As soon as I'm done with this podcast, I'm spending the rest of tonight finding it.
Glad I could contribute to something.
Because that's just like, I mean, you've heard me rant about that movie before. That is just
Cats.
a wild, like, visual spectacle. And
A nightmare.
I really want to see how the screenplay of Cats is. Because, like, maybe it's a quite sensible screenplay. Like what if I open a screenplay and it's just like, oh yeah, motivations make sense, character makes sense. Look at that finished storyline. All three like
Does it capture the visual oddness? I wonder,
yes, that's
though.
what I need to know. What do you guys think about the creation process of screenplays to movies? I know Justin, you have personal experience
I hate it.
writing screenplays
Just kidding.
before.
That's my favorite part of the process because I get to sit down and figure things out alone. Although I am trying to find like not like a writing partner, but people to write different stories with. Maybe write something with. I have a friend named Jacob that I want to write with, and a friend named Pace that I want to write with. And so like there's people I want to write with. But the one thing about it I like is being able to like figure out everything. So like what I really want to do is get a large whiteboard and just write and it's kind of like the index card process, but not with index cards. It's the writer's room thing where write down all the main points of the movie. That way I could sit down and start writing and then look over and be like, okay, that's next and start writing. And so um even like the rewrites are fun for me. So when I was doing my thesis movie, I started with a completely different story. Um that kept getting changed to the story I ended up with. Like the original story I had wasn't anything like the story I ended up with. And so it was just like a whole process of like trying to decide what to do, trying to decide what to do based on the comments I was getting, the feedback I was getting from my fellow classmates and my teacher. I kept having to change it and change it and change it. I really like writing and I really like editing because I get to do those things alone. The production process is fun when you get to work with other people, but kind of winding down and just kind of figuring things out on my own is fun.
So, what as an actor are you trying to absorb when you're reading the screenplay, and how much room for interpretation is there for when you get to the filming process?
Um, well, for my actors at least, I like to kind of give them room to like, um, so I give them the script and I say, read it, let me know what you think, and they'll come back with what they think, and I might have an idea for this character, and they're like, well, what if this character's like, this kind of thing, and I'm like, oh yeah, so I'm totally open to interpretation from my actors, and open to, if they want to create add something to the backstory or whatever. I'm like, okay, yeah, that sounds great. Whatever helps you to perform the part the way I see it in my head, and we can try to like collaborate on that. Like I do enjoy the collaboration process with expanding and creating and developing these characters. So I don't know. I like I have an idea in my head, but I'm always open to like hearing ideas from actors and stuff. I don't know if that answered your
Interesting,
question, but
as I feel like some actors might read a screenplay for parts and get turned off by what they're reading.
well, they
But
might.
unless
I
they
mean, that happens sometimes.
Yeah, they
unless they
might.
express their concerns to like, the writer, then they might just move
Well,
on.
speaking on
Might be
that,
it might be written in such a way that's hard to visualize how this could be uh, a good movie, visualizing the story.
well, luckily, I've never had to deal with that, but there were when I was doing my thesis movie, because this is the only movie I've really put a lot like a crap load of work into. One of the characters, is a mother who leaves her children and she starts a second family with another woman, right? And like I really wanted it to be another woman. I didn't want it to be a dude. I don't know why. I just felt they she needed to have met a woman. And so um there was one woman that I was gonna offer the part to her, but I was like, hey, there is an on-screen kiss with another woman. And just because of that, she was like, oh yeah, yeah, I can't do that. And I was like, okay, that's fine, I can sure find someone else. And then I found somebody who was willing to do it. Um, but then because of COVID, she was willing to do it regardless of COVID. But because I told her, I was like, I'm gonna be checking temperatures, we're gonna be wearing masks, like we'll try to be as safe as we could be. But then she had gotten some acting gig in Chicago and she really wanted to keep it. So she was like, "Is there anything we can do?" And I was like, "Yeah, I guess we can just get a pregnancy test and say you guys are pregnant now instead of kissing." Because I needed to show some sort of way that they are together and they're gonna stay together, you know.
Mhm.
So I was like, well, pregnancy test is a little cheesy, but let's go ahead and do that. So she whips out a pregnancy test and shows her girlfriend, and they hug and they run inside. And so like that's kind of the whole like working with the actor when it comes to the writing um and taking something that they're like, is there any way we can change this, and just trying to work with that.
Like you said, Justin, you're pretty flexible with your actors. Like you want their cooperation and collaboration, whereas some screenplays don't have room for that at all. Like I would say Edgar Wright's. A lot of Edgar Wright's material is is specified to a T. Like he has a very specific look in mind. He has a very specific shot style, time, framing. Everything is specified already in the screenplay. Every writer has their own style. Looking at the way the Joker was written versus the way that Napoleon Dynamite was written. the Joker had so much more gravitas, whereas Napoleon Dynamite screenplay was short, punchy, dry, because they're the written description of the way that these movies are going to visually be prepared.
Are there any examples of the differences in the screenplay versus the film, where maybe something was omitted in the actual film, but you think it was for the better? What's an example that you could think of?
I don't know.
I remember there being a few differences in Django Unchained um, screenplay versus the finished film. Um, I'm trying to specifically remember what it was. A lot of times things are just taken out, not necessarily because they were bad, just but because they were taking too long.
Right.
Pacing.
Which
Yeah.
yeah, pacing. So it's like there are scenes that would have been great to have, but they didn't think that the wider audience would sit still if they had to sit through, a 3.5 hour movie versus a 2.5 hour movie, or they were able to condense, motivations, like a character's motivations that was in 3 scenes down into one. They just found a more efficient process of ending up at the same they ended up at the same place they wanted to. They just were able to do it in a more efficient manner, which is what happens a lot during shooting, and which is why you have all those production scripts, because that's continuously being shot and edited on and worked on, and revisions here. Like, I know I haven't read the Joker screenplay, so I don't know if it's in the screenplay or not, but I do know Arthur's musicality in the movie was something that evolved on the set. I know by listening to interviews with Joaquin Phoenix and the director, that was not something that was originally intended for Arthur's character, and it just came about one day on set. I think it's the scene where he's slow dancing in the bathroom after he's murdered those 3 banker bros. That was something that evolved on set. And so whether that ended up in the final draft for when they submitted it for, best original screenplay, I don't know. But if you're able to find an early production draft, I would be willing to bet money that that wasn't in there, because that was something that evolved on set with the actors and the directors.
Yeah, I've read after the murder of the banker bros, as he put it. He goes to that bathroom and was considering killing himself, but
Yeah,
he ends up doing this. Joaquin Phoenix does this slow, mesmerizing dance that goes along with the haunting strings, and Todd Phillips liked it, so they kept it.
so stuff like that, is a screenplay is not always going to show you everything, but most of the time I feel like they are a good look into what the writer was originally intending. If you're one of those people who love to watch behind the scenes specials on DVDs or Blu-rays, you can find screenplays from all over, and I find it's one of the most authentic sources to kind of learn about this movie that you've enjoyed.
Yeah, I want to talk about one brief addition or omission difference between the screenplay and the film and Joker. Remember when Arthur Fleck, he dresses up as a clown and goes to the hospital and is singing, and that pistol falls out of his pants or out of his. I forgot that it just slipped down his pants somehow. I don't know, but anyways, it got got him fired. Basically, got him sacked from Ha-Ha's the Playhouse. So in the movie, after Arthur Fleck leaves he punches the time card box, I believe. He and says something snarky to Randall, the big hefty guy that loaned him the gun in the first place. In the movie, it just cuts off after to the next scene after you see him about to exit into the stairwell, Arthur Fleck. But in the screenplay, there's an extension with Randall following Arthur Fleck outside, and he's asking him what's up, what was all that about back in basically like the locker room, about the gun, and making insinuations that it might have been his fault for what happened, because Randall he wasn't totally aware of who might have killed or the banker people earlier, and now he feels like he's being blamed by Arthur Fleck for the sacking, because he's ultimately the one that gave him the gun. And he also, I believe, lied to his boss and say he never gave a gun to Arthur. So there was an animosity in the scene between Arthur and Randall, and you could sense the Joker creeping up in Arthur Fleck's performance, at least based on the screenplay. And I forgot the exact dialogue, but I feel like it's good that it was omitted, because maybe it's showing a little bit too early some of the motivations for why he ultimately decides to stab his former coworker to death and bashes his head against the wall. So it was more of a surprise, I feel like, seeing that apartment scene the way we saw it versus kind of the precursor moment with just after that sacking after he gets fired. So that was, I think, a good example of, yeah, it would have been nice to see that pre-Joker moment with Arthur Fleck, and the screenplay, he's singing that one song that the Banker Bros were singing, but he's singing it to Randall as he just flaunts off, and it goes off to the next scene. But I think for pacing as well, I could see how that would have, it's just been a bit too much.
Yeah. Well, that reminds me, like in Django Unchained, there was a scene that was taken out entirely, where near the beginning of the film, when Dr. Schultz originally meets Django, and he's in a line, and he's being pulled along the chain, and he asks him if he'd be able to identify the what are their names? The brothers. There's a whole flashback scene that they removed from the movie, where essentially the brothers they rape Broomhilda. They rape Broomhilda and have other slaves rape Broomhilda, and force Django to watch while they whip him and stuff. And so things like that, I think that's an example where it was probably best to be taken out, because there's plenty of other examples of how terrible that those brothers were in the film. And at a point like that, especially so early in the film, probably would have been gratuitous. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was just one example that I remembered off the top of my head.
And I know we're talking about movies, but one thing I do know is, especially listening to like podcasts like Office Ladies, they talk about a lot of stuff that is cut from the show because of like time or because it didn't make sense. And that's more the editing process, not the screenwriting process. But you got to think, like, these writers, took time to write all this stuff into the show that doesn't get put in, and they end up taking out because, like I said, because it's cut for time, or it just doesn't make sense to keep it. It's just not that funny, so they'll get rid of it. And they did that a lot in The Office, for sure, and I'm sure a lot of TV shows, where they're really, it's really time restrictive, so they have to make certain cuts.
I feel like there's certain movies you could tell that there were cuts made or there's something missing.
Sometimes movies can suffer from a lot of rewrites that end up not making sense. They keep having to rewrite, and they they're, and I've come across a few movies like that, and I can't think of them right now, but there's been a couple movies that I've seen or heard of that suffered through because of rewrites, because they write a movie and then they rewrite, and then they have to start shooting. They have to start shooting
Justice League.
Yeah, at a certain time. Okay. Because of Joss Whedon, I assume.
And Snyder's daughter.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
I mean, that's a great example of having a screenplay and it being interpreted totally different ways by the director, you know?
Mhm.
Like Zack Snyder had an intention for the film, and then when he couldn't be attached to it and see it through the way that he wanted to, they brought someone else who had a completely different vision.
And he marbleized it,
And
arguably.
he marbleized it. And that is another example of why I find reading the screenplays along with the movies so interesting, because the screenplay gives a better intention. Like it would give a better intention of Zack Snyder's, you know, meaning than it ended up being with Joss Whedon and the overproduction of Warner Brothers.
Well, Zack Snyder got his vision accomplished thanks to the outpouring of support from the community.
Yeah, but now they want Netflix to buy the Snyderverse, and I'm like, guys, let's
I'm
just,
over it at this point.
yeah, I was gonna say, let's just
I'm
put
happy
the
we got the Snyder
Justice
cut.
League. That's what I'm saying.
Justice League, yeah.
Like let's just put the Snyderverse to bed and let other people do their thing.
Yeah, let Henry move on. I'm past that. I'm not one of those
Yeah.
people that's hanging on to Henry Cavill for Superman.
I will say one caveat when looking at the screenplays versus writing screenplays is the screenplays that you come across as PDFs online are finished movies already. And they're also often written and produced by big name directors, you know, household names, massive studios. And so there's a lot more character to those screenplays than you would if you were writing a screenplay. There's very strict rules for writing what's called a spec screenplay or a speculative screenplay versus the shooting screenplay that producers and directors use in Hollywood. One is basically the initial idea and formatting it in a way to try to sell to a Hollywood studio, and the other is once it's been accepted, and you can start adding the actors' names and the you know camera movement and material and things like that, and really start characterizing it in a way that represents how your film is going to be made.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure Justin can speak. I mean, I had write a screenplay class as well, but I'm sure Justin can speak to that as he's written lots of screenplays.
Speak to what?
The difference in writing a speculative script versus being able to versus the screenplays that we read from finished production.
Oh, yeah. I mean, when you're writing, you have all of like 100%, freedom to do what you want. Now, when there's a few ways you can go about taking your screenplay to that next level. So you can either write your screenplay, fund the movie yourself, shoot it, do whatever rewrites you want, right? Or because even when I was writing my thesis, I had a committee I had to go through as well. And sometimes they're like, you have to defend different choices and say, well, they'll be like, well, why did you do this? Well, this is why. And sometimes you might win, sometimes you might lose. For the most part, I kept pretty much everything I wrote. I mean, I changed it and rewrote it, but like I didn't change it too much, to where it wasn't mine anymore. And then you could also, so like directors such as Kevin Smith, Wes Anderson, who else am I thinking of? M. Night Shyamalan. They take their movies and they might get different production companies to help fund the movie, but the script is theirs. They do whatever they want with it. Then you have movies like Waiting. Have you ever seen Waiting?
No.
Okay, so Waiting is a movie about servers in a restaurant, right? And pretty much they were able to get a script to Ryan Reynolds. Ryan Reynolds became interested instantly. They're able to shop this script around because this one actor's interested, and they found a production company that bought the script from them and decided to let them make it with probably a few changes. But they also got to direct it. They got super lucky there. So that's another way you can go about it is like, hopefully you can, or you can go the Matt Damon, Ben Affleck route too. It's the same concept where they're like, we have this script. It's a really good script. The only caveat or only condition is we have to star in it, you know, and they shopped it around. Nobody's like, who are these guys? We don't even know these guys. We're not gonna put them in our movie until Miramax and Kevin Smith helped them to get to that point, right? And so you can go that route. You can either straight up make it. You can either get a studio to make it for you, like get it greenlit and immediately make it, kind of like Juno, or you can straight up sell it, right? You can just
Yeah.
sell the screenplay, which that's where the spec script comes in. Is you shop it around and sell it, and then it's done. It's not yours anymore. Like it's gone.
Yeah, it's interesting that you brought up Juno because I actually think there is a PDF of the speculative script for Juno online.
It's cool.
Where was that? I came across it. I didn't have the time to read it, but my understanding is it was a speculative script for Juno before that was in production or accepted. So there's some great examples of produced screenplays and speculative screenplays that you can find online. If you're someone who's interested in writing, someone who's interested in creating these screenplays, one of the best things you can do is finding the speculative screenplays from these writers and producers who had their movie made in Hollywood. You can see how they formatted. You can see how they described the scenes and intentions and characters in a way that was engaging and visual for whatever intern has to read it in Hollywood in a back room somewhere.
One thing I was telling Zach before we started was one thing I would really like to do is I have a bunch of screenplays that were given to me when I was in college, and I would love it would cost like bukus of money, but love to take them all and like bind them into like hardback books and just have a screenplay library. I think that would be
dope.
so freaking cool. But if you go to a24.com, you can actually buy some of their screenplays. And they're like bounded by books. So right now they have Minari, The Lobster, Under the Skin, Lady Bird, 20th Century Women, Hereditary, Moonlight, The Witch, and Ex Machina screenplay books.
Was Call Me by Your Name, was that a A24 film as well or no? Call Me by Your Name.
I don't think so.
Dang.
Did you watch
Yeah,
that movie?
sometimes, if just finding the screenplay online isn't enough for you, they make books. Like you said, A24 makes the book. I have the shooting script for Inception. It's just a paperback book that Christopher Nolan had, and it's really cool because even in addition to the screenplay itself, it has inserts of rough drafts. The first handwritten note that he made building the dreamscape like ladder system, so he built the whole dreams within dreams layers system on a napkin in like a restaurant somewhere, and they put that in the book.
That's cool.
Rough drafts, changes, notes from Nolan himself and the editors. What do you call it? Not thumbnails. My mind's blanking.
Like
the
footnotes,
annotations, maybe
annotations.
The first like animatics that they used for mapping out scenes, things like that.
Like a storyboard.
I don't know why I couldn't think of that.
I was like animatics. I was actually looking. I wanted to see if they had any A24 books on Amazon, and I came across Get Out, the complete annotated screenplay on Amazon. I was like, that's pretty cool. Like I want to get that and just read it. So you can find them out there that are, officially. You might have to pay a little bit for it, but dang,
produce sanctions. Yeah, they have like the Dark Knight trilogy. They've got A24's Inception. They even you can probably even find, I bet you could find like a screenplay for like Star Wars or other pop cultural items.
The Grand Budapest Hotel illustrated screenplay. It's illustrated. Oh yeah, look, there's a Dark Knight trilogy. That's so freaking cool. Oh my
isn't
god.
it?
Yeah.
I love screenplays. I love reading screenplays. I love comparing them.
Oh,
The
here's
whole
Ladybird.
creation process is fascinating to me, but particularly how a thought that's in someone's brain can get, can get put on paper
Mm.
and inspire enough people to create a massive production is is just incredible to me. I love
Well,
that someone's idea can be
yeah.
made reality. And it all starts with the screenplay.
Yeah, because with the screenplay, that's what gets executives and actors and stuff interested in your work and potentially, getting it to where it needs to be on screen. That's kind of one of my dreams is to write a screenplay and either get it made or just sell it. I think just selling a screenplay would be cool.
60
Process.
bucks each.
Yeah, no, 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 no. We're talking like at least 500,000, maybe a million, maybe 5 million, maybe
Justin
10 million.
Strange screenplays are costly. I see.
Well, I'm just saying, like it can be anywhere from 500,000 to $10 million.
Because it could turn into a movie. Yeah.
Well, it just depends on how bad they want it, and if there's a bidding war between studios and who really wants it. It's just one of those things. One thing I will say that is, if I ever did sell a screenplay, I would put in there that one of the stipulations to buy my screenplay would be that my name has to be in the credits. So it'd be like original screenplay by Justin Strange. Like
Yeah,
that would be. I mean, not saying they
it makes
wouldn't
sense to
already do
me.
that, but I
Doctor
would I would
Strange.
I would make that happen. That would be in the
Yeah.
contract.
Yeah. So anyway, I think that's all I have. Is there any closing statements or thoughts you gentlemen have to share?
I love
One,
screenplays. Well, it makes this conversation wants me to delve more into kind of what you do, Jake, regarding watching the film and following along via the screenplay. Didn't you said you used to follow a synopsis while you watch scary films because you don't want to be
Yeah, I'm
surprised?
I'm a wuss when it comes to scary films. So uh
uh,
so I'll follow synopsis, not the screenplay,
That's next. Do that
but just a
next.
synopsis of just like, oh, they're in the closet and some ghost pops out. Okay, I know what's gonna happen. I won't be wigging out.
one thing I will say is if you want to write a screenplay, now I'm not talking to you two, I'm talking to whoever's listening. If you want to write a screenplay, it is so easy. Like the first screenplay I ever wrote was before I went to college for it, and I just looked up how to do it on the internet, and I did it, and I wrote like a 90 something page screenplay. I mean, it was crap. Um, I mean, looking back on it now and thinking about it, like it wasn't as good because it was real surface. It was a superhero movie and it was real surface layer stuff. Like nothing, um, no real character development, no deep no nothing like that. Like it was just conversations and action. Nothing super, um, nothing super developed. But I wanted to do it, and I did it. Like, and I would write it on my computer, and then since I didn't have a laptop, when I was in class, I would just write it on paper and then type it when I got home. And so it's as easy as they say, 1, 2, 3. It's easy as being yourself.
Yep. And there are free software programs out there. When I was in
I
college, I used Celtics.
Yeah, I use
Um,
I use that too. Now I use
yeah,
Final Draft. Um,
yeah, so that they have programs like even if you don't know the correct formatting for building a screenplay, there are programs that help you correctly format
mm,
a screenplay.
I used
But
Word.
you don't have to you don't even have to use these programs. I've written a screenplay in my little like 8 by 10 notepad. I had a dream one night and I woke up in a cold sweat and I wrote like a little 3 minute screenplay based off a dream that I had
Yep.
just in my notepad. So
Yeah.
so long as you have the passion to pursue it and do it,
Mm.
you shouldn't let anything stop you because it's a really cool process.
Pursue it and do it and don't say screw it. Am I right, guys? I just made that up. One more piece of advice: keep a dream journal because dreams make the best screenplays. Okay,
True.
so if you have something right next to you when you wake up, you write it down immediately. That way, it's there, and that way, when you go back to it, you're like, "Holy crap! I remember this stream, and that way you can write it.
Well, I think that's going to do it for the podcast tonight. Thank you so much for joining and listening with us. Let us know what you think. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube. We want your interaction. We want to know what you want us to talk about. Whether you like it, you hate it, interact with us. We're also that sounded really desperate. But we
need
enjoy
the feedback.
Yeah. You can also find us on Spotify, Apple, Google Podcasts, essentially anywhere that a podcast can be found. Thank you so much for listening in, and have a fantastic day.